And I don't want to steal his thunder. He told me to keep it short and sweet for that reason. So give it up for Greg Paul.
There I go. So you're not going to learn how to get a promotion or a pay raise like you learned earlier today. In fact, I have actually a couple of my kids work for Exxon down in Houston, Texas. And when I invite them on mountaineering trips, I wouldn't invite them to Everest, but other mountaineering trips, they tell me that Exxon would fire me if I go on something like that because Exxon likes risk-adverse employees. So don't go work for Exxon if you're a mountaineer or enjoy going and doing stuff that I enjoy. It's sort of like an Everest presentation's like a 5-course dinner. And to really get you through the whole experience, it takes more than 45 minutes. So I'm the chef, and I've decided to give you the main course and dessert here to try to get us done so you can get to your ice cream. Let's see, I'm still technology deficient here. I'm not like the TED Talk people that were here earlier. I'm still learning the stuff, but let's see how I can do here. I'm going to be referring to some of my notes because I kept a blog on there, and sometimes to get the feeling that I had at the moment, I like to go back to my blog. And when you're climbing a mountain like this up at high altitude, you get pretty thin-skinned. Your emotions are close to the surface. So there's times during my presentation where I'm almost back there. So I like to be able to go to my notes because it just helps me stay on track and also keep my emotions under control. So how did I start this journey? Okay. Well, let's see how I start this journey with this. Okay, this did work earlier today. Backup plan. So back in 1996, I was working hard in a financial service business that I actually owned at the time. I was a sole proprietor, a lot of pressure, putting in those entrepreneurial 80-hour weeks. And I was at a meeting, and I was invited by a friend, Fred Patucha, to go on a mountain climbing adventure to Russia to climb Mt Everest. And I gave him the excuse at the time, like, I don't have a month that I can go and do that. I'd really like to, but sorry, Fred, it isn't part of the plan at this point. Well, he came back and called me a few weeks later and said, Greg, don't get so caught up making a living that you forget to make a life. That was kind of a pivotal point in my life, and it made me think. I had 4 kids at the time, and anyway, I decided to go on a climb with him. And that began really my climbing career. And I won't call it a career. I don't make money doing it. I just have fun. But I want to get into a little bit about me and what makes me tick so you can understand the psychic of an Everest climber. Oh, now it works. No, it didn't.
I think you're holding the controller backwards.
Okay. How could you see that? You'll see later how I'm sort of technologically deficient in my presentation. Okay. I should just go back, get presented again, start all over, Okay, Corona Arch. I'm a thrill seeker. The Corona Arch is in southern Utah. It's 100 feet high and became a YouTube favorite for a few months until the BLM shut it down for jumpers. this is me a few years ago.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, man. Oldest man to swan dive off of an arch, 120 feet up.
However, I brought 3 professional guides and an accountant to measure the rope to make sure there was not enough slack in that thing that I had any chance of hitting the ground. Back in the 70s, the reason I moved to Utah, I took up skiing back east, and obviously anybody that comes to Utah, which I did when I was a teenager to visit some relatives and gets a taste of Utah snow, they got to come back. And anyway, I was part of what was called the hot dogging movement back in the early 70s. And my specialty was moguls and jumping.
We do begin with the single worst tragedy
Whoops.
ever on Mount Everest.
That's-
That ferocious avalanche.
That's the wrong thing. Okay, I'll improvise here. So as a result of my thrill-seeking daredevil lifestyle that took a lot out of my knees, I ended up actually not being able to walk back in 2003. I could barely get upstairs, let alone downstairs. So all the things that I love to do, climbing, mountain biking, skiing, those sort of things, I couldn't do them. I went to a doctor and he said, your only alternative is, not doing anything and be normal, or get artificial knees. So I opted for the second. Now, this is what they look like. There's actual pair right up here if you want to look at them later. This is what it looks like in my knee. This is a more observable, this is an x-ray of them. Maybe I should have had this thing turned around at that point. My philosophy or my motto: life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in an attractive and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in sideways, body thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and screaming, woohoo, what a ride. I've always liked that. And with the advent of artificial joints, it looks like I might be able to continue following my motto. Well, Everest 2012. By the time I decided to climb Mount Everest, only 3,000 people had climbed and 300 people had died trying. At a 10% chance of getting killed doing it, it took about 2 weeks to convince my wife that I should go. I won't get into all the details here, but I was on a long drive, actually from here down to southern Utah, and my wife had already deep-sixed the idea a few times, but I brought it up again on the drive, and I'm pretty persistent. And probably about between Cedar City and Kolob Canyon, I think I remember, she finally told me, Greg, you're not getting any younger. And I went, yeah. And that was her thumbs up, you can go. That was, however, February 15th of 2012. And typically it takes about 2 years to train and get ready for Everest. I had a month and a half. Let's just say I spent a lot of time in REI. A man walking on the moon is the only thing that compared to the excitement on May 29th, 1953, when Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay Sherpa stood on top of Everest. Climbing Everest represents the pinnacle, and still does, of human endeavor. That has always attracted me to that mountain. In 2012, I went over there, and we were plagued by numerous avalanches as we were climbing, and other disasters, not to mention a lot of bad weather and other things. But at that point, I didn't know what to expect when I was on Everest. I just thought that was par for the course. You read into thin air and those kind of things, so you knew bad things happened while you're over there. And so we kind of just, my whole team, 24 of us, kind of went with the flow and dealt with some pretty scary situations. And we were all ready for our final climb to go to the summit, and we had a team meeting. And we showed up to the team meeting expecting to get our marching orders for the next day to go to the top of the mountain. And here's that meeting.
I've been talking a lot with the Sherpas, and this year we
Everest,
see that
that's
the guys
Russell
are not
Bryce,
happy.
our expedition leader.
We're pretty shit scared about this whole icefall. We are very, very concerned that there's going to be a major accident here. Sooner or later, and there's going to be a big avalanche come. If that happens,
That's me.
we can kill half of you people in this room. So I dare say I've made the decision to stop our expedition. It's too bloody dangerous. It's hard for me to say this, that I want to stop this expedition. Really, really hard. I don't want to be responsible for killing half of you guys.
It's an incredibly tough decision for Russ and his team of guides and Sherpas. But it comes from years of experience climbing on Everest.
So that's still almost as tough for me to watch as it was for me to sit through it. We were sent packing our bags home, and within a week and a half, I was back in Utah. And then this news report.
Wait till you see these pictures we have to show you. It might just be the last place on Earth you'd expect to find a traffic jam, the top of the world, Mount Everest, but a combination of bad weather and really too many people looking for that peak experience all at the same time has turned tragic.
So what happened that year was, and we weren't on the mountain, we were back in Utah by now, was that there was only so much time. Something called a summit window was only 2 days long, and normally it's longer. And the people who chose to remain there, even though the weather was bad and there were things to be concerned about, as Russ pointed out in his talk to us in that video, people pay a lot of money to go there, and it's not easy to leave. And this is what it looked like up at 26,000 feet up on Mount Everest. A conga line of people going up the mountain. That's what it looks like looking up at them. When it's like that, this is the Hillary Step at 28,750 feet, where there's nearly 100 people all vying for staying on the rope, some trying to go up, some trying to go down. When there's lines like this, you're spending hours just standing, waiting for people to get around you or to get around them, using up your oxygen, getting cold. 2012, 11 people died descending after summiting because of that situation. So we were all pretty upset going home, but after we got home and saw this on the news, we were very thankful that that decision was made. Well, I wasn't one for giving up. So 2014 went back. The mountain was in great shape that year. It looked perfect for climbing. I was in great shape. I was excited. than this. Khumbu Ice Fall, 6 a.m. in the morning. Sherpas taking supplies up for Camp 1 and higher.
Good morning, Babadai.
Morning.
के छ आराम अनि क्या मन एकदम ठिक छ यार आज फर्स्ट दिन आएको बाटो बिग्रियो भने अलिक टेन्सन गराइरहेको छ तर ठिकै होला 65 भइसक्यो अनि बाटो कस्तो लाग्यो तपाईँलाई
बाटो ठिकै लाग्यो आज भिलेसम्म छ
है
कस्तो छ हेरौँ
So 2012 had been now overtaken 1996 as the deadliest season on Everest, but now 2013 took over that title, the deadliest year on Everest, with 16 Sherpas being killed with a 30 million pound ton of ice coming down 2,000 feet above them, right on top of them as they were climbing a ladder similar to the one you saw there. All Everest expeditions, not just ours, all were canceled that year. Everybody went home. Basically, it took the wind out of everybody's sail as far as wanting to climb after something like that happened. All the deaths were Sherpas. There was no Westerners up on the mountain at that point. It was a very difficult time. Then 2015, things just weren't working out for Nepal. A 7.8 earthquake killing over 9,000 people in Nepal. And Everest wasn't spared by this by any means. Now this is going to have some language in it, but if you were there, you'd kind of understand why. This is lunchtime at Everest Base Camp, which is normally, has always been a safe place to be. Nobody's ever been killed in Everest Base Camp by any avalanche or rock fall. It's well away from the sides of the mountains. But when there's a 7.8 earthquake, that changes things. So this is, well, you'll see. This is when the earthquake hits and the aftermath. And sorry about the language up front. Just a climber taking a picture. Feeling the earthquake.
Oh!
Look at the cloud of snow coming in.
Fuck!
That was a 2,000-foot high wall of snow coming down from miles away right through the center of base camp, destroying everything in its path, picking up people who were casually wandering around, going to lunch, and throwing them at 200 miles an hour against rocks. All Everest expeditions canceled, 19 deaths. Now the deadliest year on Everest. It just kept getting worse. Failure and/or disaster defined my 4 years of Himalayan climbing from 2012 to 2015. So the theme here is Everest Effort. One thing that makes up an Everest effort is, I call it positive perseverance. You got to keep smiling through it all and make the best of it. And there's a couple of ways to persevere. You can do it begrudgingly, head down, not smiling, or you can be positive about it and deal with the situation. I'll read this. Just as we continue to launch ourselves into space, even though missions sometimes turn into tragedy, mountaineers will always try to climb Everest to experience the majesty, beauty, and adventure of our closest frontier to the universe. For many, the rewards far outweigh the risks. That was how I felt. Here's my track record as far as climbing over the years. The green are mountains that I made it to the top. The red are the ones I didn't make it to the top, all because of weather-related issues. I like to say, if you're a sore loser, don't become a mountaineer, because especially when you get to the higher peaks, like Himalayan peaks, your chance of success on your first climb are very low. Anyway, how do you get ready for an Everest climb? I included this here because we're here in Utah, and in Utah we have a special opportunity to do what I call the Wasatch Work-Out. It's the Stairway to Heaven down in Provo Canyon, doing ice climbing. This is just up right by Beaver Creek. It's called the Crowbar Race that I did last year. So there I am. You hike up and ski down and do a couple of laps, very endurance oriented. Mountain biking we can do year-round in Utah. It's my snow bike up on the Alpine Loop near Mount Timpanogos in January. In addition to those fun workouts, I did some things that are not so fun. For 2 months, I slept in a hypoxic tent that replicated being up to as high as 18,000 feet. My wife did not join me for 2 months. I guess that could be a form of birth control, but not that I'm worried about that anymore. Also, Stairmaster. Actually, Stairmaster gave me a Stairmaster. I convinced them that they should sponsor me, so they gave me the Stairmaster, and I used the same machine that I used for the tent to take me up to 18,000 feet on a Stairmaster. I'll tell you, you don't walk very fast when on a Stairmaster at 18,000 feet. Finally, I did my own kind of CrossFit that focused on endurance, and this was during my 1,000 step-ups on that 24-inch box with a 45-pound backpack on my back. It took me close to 2 hours. So that not only tested your physical fitness, it's sort of a mental thing too, to be able to just persevere through that monotonous 2 hours. So, Everest effort. What else is needed for an Everest effort? Preparation. And that's just part of the preparation. I don't even have time to tell you all the other things I did or the time it took to get gear and prepare other things to be able to go. Everybody always asks, what does it cost? Well, I'm just going to say it's going to cost around $80,000 to $90,000 if you want to go to and climb Mount Everest. How do you afford that? Well, you either got to be a rich entrepreneur, save all your money for all your life, and just be a dedicated climber, or you got to get creative. So remember my artificial knees. I had done some research on climbers, and I had found out in 2012 that, which I did pay for, by the way, when I went over there at that time. I found out that nobody had climbed any 8,000 meter peak, or that's 26,000 feet, and there's 14 of them with artificial knees. The company that made my knees is in Draper, Utah, and my doctor, Mark Mariani, is at the St. Mark's Hospital, and he had a hand in designing the knee that he put inside of my leg. Well, I went to Mariani, and before my 2014 expedition, and I said, you know, Mark, no one's ever climbed Everest with artificial knees. Well, how would you like, do you think the knee company might find that a good marketing, piece of material if they could go around and tell people, their doctors that their knees have been on top of Everest? Anyway, he took the idea to the president. I had lunch with the president, kind of was a little more eloquent in describing the benefits of me doing this. And in 2 weeks, I was a sponsored athlete. And I got a t-shirt. I also got on the front of their booth. They're owned by a Japanese company, by the way, and I think this is the clincher. Japan mountaineers are heroes over there. They're like, soccer stars or football stars or baseball stars. So the mother company really liked the idea of the knees going up to the top of Everest. So yeah, I'm on the booth. Okay, so Everest Effort. What else is there? Where there's a will, there's a way. You got to be creative sometime. Get the creative juices going, entrepreneurial spirit. You don't have the money, figure out how to get it. Well, so you saw what happened, though, in Everett in 2014. We didn't make it to the top. And I had to go back and convince them again in 2016. And I had put enough effort in the last 4 years that I felt this time around I really deserved it. So why do you go over to Everest?
Climbing Everest is extremely difficult, and it's not easy for anyone, whether you be young, old, a super athlete, whatever. It hurts, and there's a lot of frustration and a lot of pain and a lot of effort goes into reaching that high point. So that's a fascination for many people, and so people always come and climb Everest because it's there.
Well, that's one reason, because it's there. Well, the other reasons were because these guys were there, the employees of Ortho Development, who all had a hand in making what's inside of my knee. They were very proud of the fact that they had, it was like they were part of a Indianapolis 500 Grand Prix team, and they had built the suspension for the car. They had built my knees, my suspension, and they wanted me to go back. And this is the day I went on the way to the airport. They gave me a going away party, and they all wore, well, I got another t-shirt. Might as well show that. So I got 2 t-shirts out of this gig. And it was a big part of me by this time that I really wanted to demonstrate to people of my age. I'm 62. I've been through a lot as far as getting knees replaced and injuries and coming back. And I wanted to sort of demonstrate to my fellow baby boomers that life isn't over just because your knees are gone. You can fix things nowadays and get back to your game. But I think even more important, it was for my family. Some of my neighbors who went and watched the movie Everest last year were really upset that I was going to go climb after that movie. They go, "You're crazy. Did you see what happened in that movie? What are you doing? You got a family. You got 13 grandkids." And I just had to cover my ears, not listen. I will read this. It might sound crazy to do something as dangerous as I thought I got over this through doing these presentations a few times. Okay, it might sound crazy to do something as dangerous as Everest with 5 children and 13 grandchildren, but after 4 failed expeditions to Nepal, I wanted them to know that their father and grandpa was not someone who gave up easily. I knew that at some point in their lives, there would be challenges arise when they might say to themselves, if if Grandpa could do it, I can do it. So that was, I see too many screens with family on it. Anyway, that was a primary motivator. Also, my wife gave me these instructions. So that was really what it was all about. Okay, Everest Effort. You need inspiration and motivation, and all that I just showed you kind of makes up that. Okay, now I'm going to have to really speed because I'm supposed to get done with all that in like 15 minutes. Now it's 28 minutes. It's a 75-day trip to Mount Everest from door to door. That's a lot of time. The trek takes 10 days. Starts out in a small town called Lhotse, 9,000 feet. When you get up there, there are no motorized vehicles. Everything it goes up and down the 39 miles to Everest Base Camp and to the 11 villages between Lhotse and Everest Base Camp. Goes on the back of porters or on the back of yaks, or in my case, and with the climbers, we don't have to carry much. That goes on the back of porters and on the back of the yaks. We just carry what we need for that particular day. And I took an additional little extra item. I call him Eddie the Yeti. I work with something called Ski Utah, an association, and that's their mascot. And it is a Yeti puppet. And I thought, how appropriate to get a Yeti back to Nepal to the top of Mount Everest. I mean, I bet a Yeti has yet to gone up there, even if they are real. Anyway, to get to Everest Base Camp, it's a beautiful trek. I highly recommend it. It's very popular. You meet people from all over the world, and there's thousands of people that do it during the climbing season. It's not easy, especially when yaks are coming down the other way. You step off the trail because they don't care who they push off. You stay in tea houses, which are fairly comfortable. They have one room that's heated by a potbelly stove and yak dung. The rooms which are not heated are simply plywood. They give you blankets, but you bring your 20 below zero sleeping bag and sleep in that, because it's typically about 10 degrees at night, because they turn off the stove or they just don't keep the stove going after about 8 o'clock at night. You can hear everybody snoring in the rooms next to you. But you're rewarded with amazing scenery. This is Namche Bazaar, population about 2,300, one of, again, the 11 villages you go through on the way up. This is just a typical view. And you have to watch out with the view because, as you can see right here, the trail's quite narrow and it drops off about 2,000 feet. And if you're sitting there staring at the mountains, you may go for a little ride down that side of that hill. My son, when he was 14 years old in 2014, came with us on that trip to Everest Base Camp. And he thought our destination was right, a hotel or a tea house right there. But we had to go all the way down to a riverbed that's literally 2,000 feet down and then all the way back up here to that. And he goes, they should just build a zip line and go across. That's American mentality. That mountain right there is called Ama Dablam, one of the mountains I've tried to climb over there. It's the Matterhorn of the Himalayas. This is, again, the trail going along here through another village down there. And 5 days away from us is Mount Everest up there with what's called a cloud flag. That means the winds are blowing about 150 to 200 miles an hour up on top of Everest. There again, Ama Dablam. Everest Effort. Enjoy the view or the journey. That's part of the reward of going places like this. And if you're not going to make the summit, you might as well enjoy the journey. Well, we got to Everest Base Camp finally, and Everest Base Camp is really a global village. It's a mini United Nations. When I was there this year, there was over 750 people in how many? 34 different expeditions representing 30 different countries. In a normal year, not after 3 disastrous years, there's over 1,000 people up there. But in 2016, this year, I guess we're still in, I did this year. Wow. Because a lot of people are actually pretty freaked out about what happened for the last 3 years. So a lot of people that were planning on going wanted to see how this season would shake out before coming back. I figured that there wasn't going to be a lot of people coming back this year, and thus it would be a good year to go because I didn't want to get stuck in one of those lines. So this is our base camp right here. This Everest Base Camp is over a mile long. Right at the bottom was called the Khumbu Ice Fall, and this is the ice fall that you have to climb up and go up here, South Col, and that's the top of Everest right there. But these are all tents of these 34 different expeditions scattered among the rocks. And this is my home right there for the next 2 months. And we're on top, about 6 inches down below all this rock is this ice right here. It's constantly moving, cracking big rocks that are way down underneath the ground, and you listen to that, especially at night when it's very quiet. And it's a little disconcerting at first, but you get used to it. You just hope that the ground doesn't open up and swallow you up, because there's a lot of holes around. And this is constantly moving. This is what it just looks like looking up the ice fall or up Everest Base Camp at the other camps. In 2012, my son gave me an iPad because he had a business that involved iPads. And he wanted me to take the first iPad up to the top of Everest. And back then it was kind of a new thing, and I thought, oh, that would be kind of cool to do that. Maybe I'd bring it back and sell it to Steve Jobs for a lot of money. Anyway, but he gave it to me at the airport, and basically it gave me a 5-minute instructions. And I used that iPad once I got up to base camp to take some pictures because it was Wi-Fi that I could get at one of the lower villages and send it off. So I went into the middle of base camp, up onto a hill, and I wanted to take this beautiful panoramic view of base camp with the iPad that I had just, well, not really learned how to use, but
here's a panorama of base camp. 1, 2. I don't think I can get it in 10 seconds. But there you go. Base camp.
Everest Effort. Don't take yourself too seriously. This was the view of Mount Everest looking out of my tent. There, whoops. There's the zipper right there of my tent, but looking up there, I was reminded every day I got out of that tent that 8 miles away, I was hoping to stand right there in about a month and a half. At night, at sunset, a dome of clouds would form over it, and that meant the winds were particularly high, but amazingly beautiful. At night, you could see the universe through the universe. It was just amazing. And as, you know, it's a God-forbidden place, but just what you could see, the tents lit up and that sort of thing, I would be just in awe when I walked out and looked around. This was at 2 o'clock in the morning once, after we stayed up late one night, and I'm walking back to my tent, and you can see some of the lights on in the tents, but literally outdoors you could read a book. This was during a super full moon that happened while I was there in 2012. 2012 team, luckily we had a small international team from these countries. Here's what it takes to get a small team up Everest. Doctors, climbing Sherpa, cook staff. And we had 3 Discovery Channel cameramen that were supported by 28 other Discovery Channel employees back in Kathmandu because they were filming our expedition. We didn't know that till we got there. And it's going to be on the Discovery Channel in November or December. And they liked the fact that I had artificial knees, so I had a camera on me a lot. And I'm sure they're going to edit it and make me look like an idiot. Everest Effort. Okay, I just showed you the team and the people. You don't want to be that guy when you're on an Everest team. You probably know what that means. It's just like, you don't want to stand out. You don't want to be the guy that holds you back or does stupid things or that nobody likes. And in an Everest effort, you got to get along with people. It's just basic common sense. And on an Everest expedition, that's particularly important. What do you do during Everest base camp? Well, it's a lot of monotonous sitting around in the morning. You wash clothes and take care of other housekeeping duties. But and also I just threw this in, from 7 a.m. till noon, it's like you're at an airport there. Helicopters are coming in and flying right over you, rescuing people that have whatever kind of sickness they have. But a lot of people are being taken away daily. And there's a few sightseers that fly up there as well. But by noon, it starts to snow usually and gets quite cold when the clouds come in. And so you retire to your tent. And people ask me, are you cold there? Well, it's just, basically you're always cold. It's just what level of cold. And you can see there, I have one fleece jacket, another fleece jacket, a heavy down jacket, gloves, and then my 20 below zero sleeping bag. So with all that, you can stay warm. When we go to our dining tent, and we are fed quite well up there, you have to have a lot of calories because you're losing a lot of calories, as you'll see in a moment. But at a dining tent, we're all there in our heavy down jackets. And as soon as they bring the food out, which is warm when they bring it out, you got to scarf it down in about 5 minutes because it's going to get cold. So how do you keep your sanity up there? And you're up there for a long time. There's something called hurry up and wait on Everest, where basically your expedition leader can say, we're leaving tonight to go up the mountain. Well, you weren't expecting that until he told you that at 8 p.m. in the evening, and then you got to get ready. But other than that, you're sitting around kind of conserving your strength or recovering from a previous day's climb. So here's some of the things that kept me from going crazy. My family and the people from Ortho Development, the knee company, gave me a pouch of letters, and I would pull out a letter or two every day and read. She needs to work on her spelling, but I got the gist. Well, it's important. Well, I would say the most important thing about climbing Everest is acclimatization. And trying to explain that to a crowd like you, it's kind of difficult and can take a while. But basically, because there's only a third of the oxygen on top of Mount Everest, you need to prepare your body to survive at that level. And I'm going to show you a little video that kind of sums it up. So that little, whatever purple red blob is me. And we go up and come back down and rest at base camp. Then we go up again, up to Camp 1 at 19,500 feet, sleep overnight, and then come back down through the icefall and rest a couple days. And then we go back up again a few days later, all the way to Camp 2, sleep 4 nights up there. Come back down, spend another 3 or 4 days at base camp sitting around. And then again we go back up, stay a night at Camp 2. Work our way up to 23,500 feet to Camp 3. Come back down, sleep again. You can't acclimatize any higher than 23,000 feet. It has no benefit going above that. It's a negative benefit. Now you wait, and then it's time to go to the top. Spend a night at Camp 2, maybe 2, depending on the weather. Now you go up to Camp 3. Now we go on oxygen. Spend a night there. Now up into unknown territory, Camp 4, where you barely sleep. Then up and up. Come on, you can do it. Come on. Yeah. And hopefully you summit. And then it's not over till you get down to the bottom. A lot of people spend another night at Camp 4 because they're so tired from that summit day, and then make their way back to Camp 2, spend another night, and then come back down, and now you're a summiteer. So those acclimatization climbs, Eddie came with me on those, and this is one of them. That's me breathing. That's the view from 20,000 feet. That's Everest right there. That's the ridge I just walked up. Right there. Now I'm looking 6,000 feet down, straight down.
You don't want to fall down there.
Said I don't want to fall down there. It's a 2-foot wide ridge.
You don't want to fall down there.
On both sides.
We're almost there, I think.
And I took Flat Stanley with me as well. So the summit push. Okay, I got 10 minutes. Just got the warning. And now I got to get through the most important stuff. So the summit push. What determines the summit push? That's basically going from base camp to the top and back down. Well, Russell Bryce has, our expedition leader, follows some very technical meteorological reports. And he's trying to figure out when the jet stream is going to move off the top of Mount Everest, which it only does for about a week out of the year, in the early part of May. And sometimes it never moves off. Sometimes it's 2 days, sometimes it could be over a week. He wanted to get us up there before all the other 34 expeditions because he didn't want to get stuck in any of those lines. He had pushed us hard to acclimatize before everybody else. And he made a prediction, a good guess, that on May 13th that we would have a summit without much wind and that we could possibly get to the top. But in order to get up for that chance on May 13th, you saw how long it takes to get up there. You got to go through Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, blah, blah, blah. You have to leave early. And so his prediction has to be made out, 6 days ahead of time because there's a little preparation before you even leave. So we left on May 9th, the hope of summiting on May 13th. And I just explained to you the summit window. So that's Everest with the jet stream on it, with the wind blowing off of it at 150 miles an hour. You cannot survive that. In fact, you can't survive anything. They don't want you up there with 25 mile an hour winds or higher. So we got to go through the ice fall. This is
the icefall at 5,486 meters is part of a glacier that flows down from the Western Cym to just below Everest Base Camp. In some places, it moves as much as 3 to 4 feet per day, ripping open crevasses and knocking over giant blocks of ice, creating one of the most lethal obstacles for any Everest climber on the south side. It's surrounded by sheer rock and ice cliffs, which can drop blocks of ice the size of houses and avalanches down their precipitous slopes, often killing anyone in their path.
Russell warned us the night that we were going to head up the ice fall. We leave at midnight. At 8:30, we had a meeting, and he said, this year, going through the ice fall, it's like playing Russian roulette with 3 bullets in the chamber. That's not what you want to hear at 8:30 when you got to wake up or try to sleep for 3 hours before you get up to go through the ice fall. This is about 1 o'clock in the morning, and we're in the icefall now, and we're gearing up to get ready to go in there, and we're putting on our crampons. That's a crampon, basically spiked steel that you put on the bottom of your boots that I have right here. Then you start to proceed up. You can see other people ahead of you with their headlamps. And then there's the ladders. Aluminum, 8 feet long, lashed together by rope over abysses that you cannot see the bottoms of. At night, going over a ladder in daytime is one thing. At night, it's even more freakier.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the process in case anybody ever wants to go over and try. You've learned it here at Utah State University.
Okay.
By the way, that is blood down there from somebody that fell and got killed and had to be pulled out. We nicknamed this the Blood and Guts Ladder. Okay, that's how it feels and looks to go across. And this is the icefall. There's a rope that goes through the entire icefall that's set up by special Sherpas. They create the path through the icefall because you have to go around and over all these chunks of moving ice. And if you had to do it yourself, you'd never figure out how to get through there. Ladders aren't just horizontal, there's vertical ladders. Everest Effort, commit. The icefall, I had it explained to me before we went through there, it's like World War I, where you're coming out of the trench to go run across the no man's land to the enemy side. Those people had to commit, and they didn't know the outcome. You have to commit. You can't chicken out halfway through the icefall. It's just not acceptable. That was 5 ladders lashed together, 40 feet. That thing, when you got on it, it bent and swayed. Very interesting. This is going down. You're always clipped in to the rope. In the icefall, you're clipped in because if you fall or get hit by ice, they want to be able to retrieve your body. Whoops. This is typical of walking through the icefall. You're on large chunks of ice that can either fall on you or it can collapse beneath you, dropping you into a void. 5 minutes. Jeez. Okay. Remember this ladder. This ladder used to be a good ladder, but it's already been hit by the icefall moving for the 3 feet per day and breaking off the rings. You'll see something later. This is me getting on that ladder, not very confident about doing so. These are the Sherpas that bring up ladders to replace the ladders that get broken or crushed by the icefall or disappear into the abysses when it moves. Finally, you get out of the icefall and enter the Western Cym, and you're in Camp 1. At Camp 1 at 19,000 feet, during the daytime, the temperature inside the tent could be up to 117 degrees. That's not very comfortable. That was the worst day of my life. But that evening, I happened to be getting stuff out of my backpack, and I found a bottle of Coke that I didn't know was there. So, Everest Effort, gratitude is also part of the Everest Effort. Going through the Western Cym, there's these huge crevasses that are completely crisscross the valley, and you have to go back and forth around them, or over snow bridges that could break as you're going over them. And you got up to Camp 2 at 21,000 feet. Now you're above the clouds, looking up the Lhotse Face where you're going to be heading up. When we first got up there, it was very dry, not promising, because when it's that dry, rocks can fall down off of Lhotse, which is the fourth highest mountain in the world. But it snowed, and that certainly helped things out quite a bit, although now there was avalanche danger. The Lhotse Face. This was one of the worst days of my life as far as mountaineering. You wear a heavy suit. I wore this for half the time, and I hated it so much because I changed it out with a friend of mine who actually had to go home. And I just figured his summit suit has to be better than mine. It wasn't. It was just a different summit suit. But these things keep you warm at 40 below, but they also keep you too hot when at 22,000 feet at 10 o'clock in the morning, it's 100 degrees out. It's like walking through the Sahara Desert, and you gotta keep everything on because the sun is too bright. The Lhotse Face, you look up there and see people going, and they're hardly moving. You're wondering why. Then you get closer, and you look up and go, wow, it is steep. And this is why they're going so slow. This is the speed. This is fast going up the Lhotse Face, connected to a rope. Everest Effort. You have to dig way deep. That's the hardest time. I needed 150% physical effort and 200% mental effort. It was more mental, mixed with a lot of prayer. There's no atheists or agnostics on Everest. Everybody's praying to something. I had rosaries, I had a Buddhist string around my neck, and I had my Mormon stuff on too. Okay, so you've got to stay connected to the rope. And this is the most important thing you wear when you're on the mountain, other than your crampons. This is called a jumar or an ascender. It slides up the rope but doesn't come down, and then this is your backup. The ropes that go up this mountain, and there's 8 miles of ropes, they're in 200-foot sections, and they're connected to metal pitons that stick into the snow or ice screws. When you get to that point, you have to disconnect and go to the next one. So you disconnect one, but you keep the other one on the lower rope. Once you're on the upper rope, you pull it over. You've got to follow that sequence. People don't, and they fall and they die. That's, if you ever go climb Everest, you just got the most important lesson right there. And the other problem is people are coming down the same rope that you're coming up. When you get to them, you have a face-off, and you've got to decide who's going to disconnect from the rope and go around the other person. And it's kind of a stare down and power play, but somehow you figure it out. Camp 3, 23,000 feet. We had a lot of snow when we were there. From Camp 3 to Camp 4, it's under a mile, but it takes you over 6 hours to get there. When we started from Camp 3 to Camp 4, an avalanche came down the side of the mountain at about 6 in the morning when we wanted to leave so we could stay out of the heat. Our expedition leader, Russ, said, wait. And we thought we were going to have to turn around because of additional avalanche danger. But he gave us the okay at 10 o'clock, but by then it was hot and miserable. At that altitude, you're burning 20,000 calories per day. Now, I know it's 4:15. Who wants ice cream right now? Can I continue? I'm getting their permission. Okay. We can just stop right now. Okay. It's steep. And you walk by people and you don't know if they're dead or alive or what stage they are as far as being dead or alive. And then this is how, as you get higher up, you go slower. And I wrote down this just so I can say it right. If there's a 200-pound frantic person drowning and you are tired and an inexperienced swimmer, do you jump in to save them? You talked about ethical things earlier today. That person you saw right there was dying. And we walked right over him knowing that. And all you can do is look in his glassy eyes and say, good luck, and move on. There's no saving somebody out there because you're close behind as far as feeling or being the same way they are. And that's mountaineering. That's the contract you sign when you go over there. Everybody agrees to that. But it's a hard one to deal with. But you're watching why it takes 6 hours to go from less than a mile. That's the most torturous 6 hours you can imagine. But you're almost there. All you have now is the Geneva Spur, which is a famous landmark right before you get to Camp 4 or the South Col. And then you drop into the death zone. The death zone, you have 24 hours where your body is degenerating. It's shut off. You will die within 24 hours. So you've got a window to get to the top of the mountain and back down in that 24-hour period. This is coming into, you feel like you're in a wind tunnel when you come up there. The first thing you do is jump in your tent. This is showing you this is the oxygen bottles we use and the oxygen system. An oxygen bottle weighs about 9 pounds. You're on oxygen at this point, except when you eat or drink. But you're not eating. You don't have any appetite. Without acclimatization and oxygen, you would black out within 4 minutes and be dead in 6 minutes at this point. And many have died. From South Col up to the summit, there are 250 bodies on the mountain. They remain on the mountain. And it's said that ego and hubris are the main cause of death, and you'll see why in a minute. But you're also in the most beautiful place you can imagine. I stuck my camera out of the tent and took a few pictures. Russell instructed us to wake up at midnight, and we were to leave at 1:30 to go for our summit attempt. That night in the tent was probably one of the most anxiety-ridden nights I can remember. We were with a teammate at this point, and my teammate was stressed out to the nth degree. And let's just say, knowing that the next day can be the best day of your life or the worst day of your life, or both, weighs on you very heavily in that 3 hours from 8:30 when we're finally trying to settle down till midnight when we have to wake up and head up. And this is the route. These are famous landmarks that all mountaineers dream about. The South Col, the balcony, the South Summit, Hillary Step, and finally the summit. It's 1 mile, but it takes 8 to 12 hours to get to the top. We spend 4 hours boiling water, melting snow for the next day's climb. All I had for 2 days was 1 bottle of Ensure. And I wish I kept that bottle, and I wish I took it to the summit and got a picture of it, because I could have been sponsored. Greg's extraordinary day did not start out so well. I was the last. I'm going to speed through this, but I want to still get the essence of my day. There was 35 climbers at the South Col on May 13th. 25 of them left at 10:30 p.m. on the 12th. My team left at about 1:10. I left at 1:30. My knees always need a little warm up, and I'm just slow. Sometimes I'm that guy in the morning. And so I was the last one out of base camp, and had problems with my crampons, with ice on them. My headlamp, the batteries were low. I had just replaced them, but when it's that cold, they wear out real easily. I was just discombobulated and not happy. But you persevere and you do it and you go on. So I got in the line there and followed the rest of the lights. Fortunately, as my light dimmed even more, we were in a trench of snow. There was so much snow up there, I could basically just follow the trench up and the other lights that were ahead of me. By 4:30 a.m., the sun had already started to rise, and I'm above what's called the balcony at about 27,000 feet. And I now only had 14 of those 35 climbers ahead of me. Somehow I was making progress. And I'm with a Sherpa, my companion at this point. The only day you're with a Sherpa is the summit day. So he's following me or ahead of me, just watching out for me, taking this picture. And Eddie's getting a free ride there. This is, when you see the views from up there, it's just so awe-inspiring. You can actually see the curvature of the world. This was about 5 o'clock. By about 5:45, suddenly a cloud came in from above, a dark cloud. And not too long after, off to my left, below us, a dark cloud was coming in with lightning. My hopes sunk instantly as I remembered the Everest film and just thought, geez, we're going to get turned around. I'm going to read now. Logically, given the intensity of the storm, it did not make sense to continue. But we did, and I passed more people until there was only 4 in front of us. By now, 10 climbers had turned around, giving up, leaving only 25 on the mountain. At 7 a.m., Noan, that's my Sherpa, and I stopped at the South Summit, the second highest peak in the world, situated at 28,704 feet, just 330 feet below the summit, to change out our oxygen bottle and rest. Over the radio, I could hear guides and expedition leaders talking about the bad weather. Climbing in 40-mile-per-hour winds is normally unacceptable. The wind chill factor is below negative 35 degrees. Any mishap would be deadly. There's a lot of mountaineering history that is played out on the South Summit. This is a picture taken not when I was there, because you could not see anything when I was there. The weather was at its absolute worst at this point. It is well above the peaks that towered above you on the trek. It is surreal trying to comprehend being so high. Sitting down to rest at 8,000 feet at an 8,000-foot express ride straight down to Camp 2 from the end of your boots is pretty amazing. This is more what it looked like when we were up there, sitting right by the rock right here, trying to get out of the wind. Amazed at the fact that we had made it this far, I was quite exhilarated. However, I was deeply worried that we would have to turn around because of the storm. With only 50 meters of visibility, we could barely make out the Hillary Step. I wanted to at least reach that piece of mountaineering history. There was only 4 climbers ahead of us. Richie, our guide, was sitting with us, and I could hear him talking with Russ about turning around. Afraid that Russ would pull the plug at any second, I tapped Noan, my Sherpa, on the shoulder and asked him if we could go. Noan looked at Richie and said, "We go." Richie nodded at Noan and said, "You know this mountain as well as anybody. Go ahead." Before I had time to think twice about it, we were headed onto 15,000 or 1,500 feet of the most treacherous but fabled mountain real estate on earth, the Cornice Traverse. This is also a picture taken an hour and a half after I summited, when the clouds had cleared a little. We then stepped out into the unknown, crossing the knife-edged ridge at 28,700 feet above sea level is hard to describe. I wondered if I would survive, but I was too excited to worry about dying. In some spots, the path was only 1 foot wide, dropping 8,000 feet into Nepal to my left and 11,000 feet into Tibet on my right. I remembered the advice given by an Everest veteran: if you fall to your right into Tibet, you'll live longer. The last place that you want to get stuck in a spider web of ropes is on the Cornice Ridge. A bunch of old ropes surfaced at this point on the ridge, confusing climbers. The red rope is the rope we have to stay on, but it's hard to find among all the old ropes left from previous climbs. The Hillary Step. The Hillary Step is normally a 40-foot rock climb, but this year it was a steep snow and ice climb because of all the snow. Huge cornices above the Hillary Step grow before our eyes with the wind blowing over them. So that right there, from here up there, is normally a rock climb, but this year it was a snow and ice climb. And that's 30 from here to the summit is about a 30-minute walk with huge cornices that drop off that 11,000 foot into Tibet. This is how it looked when I was on the Hillary Step, though. The summit ramp. Once over the Hillary Step, it's about a 30-minute walk to the summit. Within a few minutes, I passed my teammate Tracy, who was resting with her Sherpa. A few minutes later, we passed the remaining 2 climbers. I was on autopilot following no one. It was an out-of-body experience. We passed 2 people, and we were alone. We could see the summit about 500 feet ahead of us, and nobody was there. And we were the first to summit on lucky Friday the 13th. It will be my luckiest day now from here on out. At 8:05, I reached the summit of Mount Everest in a whiteout, something rarely done, and something done that's hard to forget. I was the first American to summit Everest in 3 years and the first person to get to the top with 2 artificial knees. I remembered at about 8:10 that I needed to call down to base camp on my radio. It had died, so I used no one's radio and called to Russell Bryce. I got on the radio and I said, base camp, do you read me? And then we heard some crackling, and then I hear back, base camp here. I go, this is Greg Paul on top of the world. And then there was silence for a few seconds, and then Russell Bryce gets on and goes, Greg, how did you get up there first? I am reminded then that I'm only halfway there and the most dangerous part is ahead of us. I was having the best day of my life, and I didn't want it to become the worst or last day of my life. Don't celebrate too soon in your Everest effort.
When we got...
I'm going to skip through here. You couldn't open your eyes on top. I didn't take anything off. I didn't take any pictures that I normally would have taken. You couldn't take off your gloves. If you took off your goggles, the photographer had to say, open your eyes, and then they'd open your eyes for the shot, but normally just kept your eyes shut because of the ice blowing. A normal year on Mount Everest looks like that. There's a 6-foot pile of flags and paraphernalia, scarves that have been built up around a post that was put up by the Chinese in 1972 that's 6 feet high. This year, the snow had covered everything, and when I stood up there, all that was there, this was taken about an hour after I left, this was all that was there. These flags were covered. And I stood right there. That's Edmund Hillary back in 1953, standing on the same spot, but I was 6 feet higher than him. And seriously, I started thinking about it because the wind blew all that snow off in the next few days. So there was a pile of flags when the next group of climbers came up. So I might have set a new record as far as, I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Obviously, I made it down the mountain alive. I can say a lot about that, but thank you for your attention. And if you want, I know there's ice cream. Maybe I can be out in the hall and you can ask questions. Hopefully, I answered a lot of questions in the presentation.